Oh boy. Welcome, welcome, welcome. In the words of one Brandon Drumm. This is OU Insider Live. Like 10 seconds before we went on air, Brandon was like, "All right, you're taking us in." I was like, "Shoot, I don't have a trademark thing. I got to come up with this on the fly." But welcome to all of you, whether you're a regular viewer or whether you're joining us for the first time. Obviously, it is, well, I guess it's not the month of December yet. We still got 4 hours left of November, but we are getting real close, just 3 weeks away, in fact, to early signing day for the 2023 cycle. And so as this recruiting class winds to a halt, and as the 2022 regular season starts to fall into the rearview mirror, we've got a lot to talk about. Obviously, Oklahoma's coming off a 51-48 overtime loss to Texas Tech, which puts the finishing touches on a 6-6 regular season that by really any measure is a disappointment, at least as compared to the expectations that many had for this program leading into the season. And that said, the silver lining therein is that despite their struggles on the football field, the Sooners have still continued to recruit very, very well and have their sights set on some big-time targets down the stretch as they attempt to round out their 2023 class, a class that right now is number 7 in the nation in the 24/7 sports team recruiting rankings. So we will discuss some of those key targets down the stretch over the course of the next hour and change. Those include, naturally, Peyton Bowen, the 5-star safety out of Denton Guyer, DJ Hicks, the 5-star defensive lineman out of Katy Paetow, his teammate, 4-star linebacker Damian Sanford. You got 4-star edge Cecilia Kana, and how about a new but familiar name in the mix? 4-star wide receiver and current Arkansas Razorback commit, Micah Tease. And I guess that's the natural place at which we need to start here on this Wednesday evening, Brandon, is we haven't gotten the chance to do one of these since Anthony Evans decommitted. And it was really out of the blue. Nobody really had much of a heads up that that was coming. But in the later stages last week, he flips at a minute's notice to Georgia, the number 1 team in the country right now, and obviously a lock for the college football playoff as things stand right now. A lot of family ties there to Georgia. It's an understandable decision, even if it wasn't one that many folks, particularly on the OU end, were expecting on that afternoon when Evans made the announcement. But one of the things that we had always discussed on this show, on OUinsider.com and elsewhere, was that if there ever came a time where Oklahoma lost a wide receiver commit, there was a very clear plan of action, a very clear contingency plan, and that involved the guy right down the road at Booker T. Washington High School in Tulsa, Micah Tease. So he is still committed to Arkansas for right now, but Oklahoma remains a very active contender and they've begun to push behind the scenes ever since Evans flipped to Georgia to try to get back in the mix for Tease with 3 weeks to go until ESD.
Yeah, Oklahoma's going to be pressing really hard. I'm over here trying to edit my notes actually on Micah Tease, Peyton Bowen, and David Hicks that I'm posting right now. Here, it'll be up in the next 5-10 minutes after we go back and forth a little bit, and I'll be editing while Parker's talking and all that type of stuff. And it's going to have more information than what I'm going to say on here. I'm just going to be straight up honest with you guys. So our VIP guys get the most in-depth part of it all. Oklahoma is going after Micah Tease really hard. They've been going after him for like a month and a half. And I was told that LD Washington kept that warm for a while. I mean, even when the Anthony Evans stuff was going on. And look, at the end of the day, no matter what was told, and the reason why he was kept warm was because there was always this sense, and this is what I was told by somebody that was very close to the Evans recruitment. And it was Evans' heart was always at Georgia. Oklahoma somehow flipped it back. But a few weeks after all that happened, he went back to communicating. It wasn't to the point like what 24/7 people have said that, they silenced the Georgia and all that type of stuff. This was much harder than that, because if you look at the dates, the kid was still wearing all the Oklahoma backplate and all that type of stuff whenever he was playing. football on Friday nights. So that just doesn't make sense to be doing all that and be silently committed somewhere. But at the end of the day, Oklahoma wanted to keep some guys warm. Chance Fitzgerald's another guy. Obviously, he's a teammate of Taylor Wine, the Sooners defensive end commit out of Nolensville, Tennessee. And then you have Micah Tease in Oklahoma. Feels like they have a chance to flip that. And I expect them to be doing an in-home really soon. I'm going to have the date up on OU Insider VIP here in just a minute. But yeah, I think Oklahoma will be in there fairly quickly to go do an in-home with Micah Tease. I do think there's some people that have to be sold on the idea of Oklahoma. I know for a fact that Jackson Arnold is leading this charge along with Jeff Lebby, LD Washington, and Brent Venables. Jackson Arnold was a huge player to even get the communication to start going back towards with Micah Tease to begin with. So there's a lot at play here. It's not a for sure thing, but I think at the bare minimum, Oklahoma is going to be causing a lot of questions for Micah Tease as National Signing Day gets closer.
How about another interesting target that has emerged over the last couple weeks? Really, this has only just started to heat up, but I will say I've heard some interesting things over the last 24, 48 hours regarding four-star defensive lineman and current Michigan commit Eno Etta, who of course visited Oklahoma unofficially on November 19th. And I think, and I'll give you credit, Brandon, because I think it was back in July that you said, I can almost promise you, come National Signing Day, this staff is going to pull off a flip or pull off an addition that nobody sees coming, that is completely out of left field. And when Eno Etta visited Oklahoma on November 19th, that in itself was completely out of left field. But as we've continued to see the Sooners try to shore up their defensive line and not put all of their eggs in the DJ Hicks basket for obvious reasons, two guys that have emerged as targets in that capacity are Eno Etta and three-star Kansas State commit Jordan Allen, whom Oklahoma is recruiting as an athlete. He could play defensive end. He could play tight end. It just kind of depends on need there. But I think the refreshing thing is that, you have another guy right now, Cade McIntyre, that's committed to play tight end, but could very easily switch the defensive side of the ball as well. And, that's one thing that Venables and his staff have done in years past and will continue to do at Oklahoma is recruit guys as athletes, not necessarily have a design on which side of the ball that they'll play when they get there, but just make a priority of recruiting players that they know are going to be capable of displaying positional versatility and flexibility and give them a little bit of added wiggle room with the roster and with the depth chart in Norman. So Eno Etta, definitely a name to file away, if for no other reason than the fact that his best friend, and I'm gonna butcher this name, hopefully I come close.
I'm not even gonna attempt it, so go for it.
Collins Akempong, four-star athlete from the state of California, best friends with Eno Etta, as we have our first camera malfunction of the evening. Now, Collins Akempong, I hope, decommitted from Michigan yesterday and flipped to Miami. Now, he's very close with Eno Etta. Those two were planning on rooming together. That had a substantial effect on Etta, from what I have been told and talking to sources thus far in the early stages of the aftermath. And this isn't to say that Etta opens things back up, but if he does, I expect Miami to be heavily involved, and I expect Oklahoma to be heavily involved. So we will see where that goes. But you mentioned in-homes starting up here soon, Brandon, and the Oklahoma staff is going to be out and about late this week and on into the weekend, not just doing in-homes, but also watching some of their key commits and targets. Jackson Arnold he and Denton Geyer have put together a 13-0 season to this point. They'll be doing battle with Southlake Carroll this Saturday. And the word is Oklahoma's going to have several staffers in attendance, not just for Arnold, obviously, but for one Peyton Bowen, 5-star safety out of Denton Guyer as well. And I can't say a word about that situation without incurring the wrath of the Golden Domers. But the Sooners continue to press very hard for Peyton Bowen.
Yeah, no, I think they'll be on hand this weekend, along with obviously Oklahoma will be there. Again, on OU Insider, I'm going to have the coaches that will be there, and where I'm going to have a few coaches that are going to be doing in-homes with certain people. And there's more than what I just hinted about earlier in this note coming up. So, but yeah, it's Peyton is an interesting thing. And it's not that I am going to say he's going to go to Oklahoma, because I'm not ready to say that. I feel like it's trending towards that because of things I've been told in the last 24 hours. There's a lot of things that are working in Oklahoma's favor, and I know Notre Dame fans don't want to hear that. But I've always said, and I've always kind of prefaced it and thrown a disclaimer out there, and I've said, look, I'll believe it when I see it. Because we've been going through this and rehashing this over and over and over. And it's not that I know there's some people in there and they're arguing, oh, well, he would have done it if he was going. No, it's not that easy. Like, y'all think it's so easy for these 18-year-olds to just go, yep. If that was the case, Colton Vasek wouldn't have drug Oklahoma along for a month and a half before he decided he was going to flip, or Anthony Evans wouldn't have done it for 3 months before he decided he was going to flip. These relationships are deep, they're ingrained, and these kids don't like this. You got to remember what you were like as a 16, 17, 18-year-old kid. You don't want to disappoint people. And it's not just disappointing the coaches, it's disappointing people around you that feel like, oh, well, that's the best place for me, or, oh, well, that's the best place for him, or this, that, or the other. There's so many variables that are working into these kids' decisions. NIL is one. I know people are going to say that. Definitely with Peyton Bowen, I'm going to say NIL is one. And Oklahoma's played the game better than anybody with this. So I will say that, like, Oklahoma's playing the NIL game with Peyton Bowen. That's not even a secret at this point. Like, it's well documented. And so anybody that thinks it's a foregone conclusion that he's just going to Notre Dame because he's just, I mean, I'm not saying he's not, but it's so much further than a foregone conclusion. So much further than the foregone conclusion. You have to remember, he has the NIL. He has the fact that he's been to Oklahoma. Like, people need to remember when he committed to Notre Dame and Oklahoma just had gotten the new staff hired and all that type of stuff. Where was he 5 days later after he committed to Notre Dame?
He was at Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm. Where has he been 15 times since then? Oklahoma. He visited 4 OU home games this year. 4 of the 6 games Peyton Bowen attended. He went to 1 Notre Dame game. His girlfriend is signed to play soccer there, and they've been dating for a long time.
Go ahead and say it, Brandon, or I will.
Yeah, it's undefeated. Girlfriends are undefeated.
There you go.
Doesn't mean Oklahoma's not going to be the first one to lose that battle, but for the most part, girlfriends are undefeated. His best friend and the guy that's taken him to 2 state title games already and potentially a third if they win the next 3 games. Jackson Arnold committed to Oklahoma and wants him to join him in Norman. They want to be roommates. They've talked about it extensively. This is so hard for these kids. I mean, I know this is going to bring up a whole lot of issues mentally for a lot of Oklahoma fans, but There's a reason why David Hicks was so back and forth and then waited the last second and then called Oklahoma before announcing. Relationships are tough. They're tough to say no to for these kids. And yeah, I know NIL played into some things there, but Oklahoma was playing the NIL game there too. That's fact. So it's far from a foregone conclusion, and I fully expect Oklahoma. I mean, they're basically going to live in Denton, Texas over the next few weeks, because I think they can visit twice a week, right? Or is it once a week, or is it twice a week? I can't remember the exact rule with the assistants. Can't they do one school and one in-home a week? Is that not how it works?
I don't know.
I have to get clarification on that. Essentially, the head coach gets one try with everybody, I believe, during this, as far as in-home goes, but the coaches can go every week. And so basically you can dang well expect Oklahoma to live in Denton. And I was told this: if Denton Guyer makes the state title game, I will bet money Brent Venables is on the sideline. I'll bet money. As a matter of fact, that's where they're setting up to use it with Peyton, is with Brent, is the state title game.
Which makes a whole lot of sense.
Yep.
On a variety of different fronts.
Yep. Because he can go straight from the game to the house and celebrate with him.
Shout out to Mongo for the $10 contribution in the super chat. He wants us in turn to shout out Ricardo LeBlanc. So
Ricardo, hey, guess what? Hey, Derek's team is killing it. Derek LeBlanc's team is killing it. They are, I want to say they're either in the semifinals or the championship game, one or the other. Like they've gone on a roll, an absolute roll. Let me look and see what else. Parker, we talked about this earlier yesterday, wasn't it? They're 10-3 now. They are in the state championship game versus Lakeland on Friday night, 7:30 p.m. So big time deal for Osceola. Nobody expected them to do it after how they played some of the season, and they've caught fire. And from what I hear, LeBlanc has been a dude. So that's huge. I fully expect that Bates will probably be there on Friday night. Just a guess. So, yeah, man. How about that? I mean, can it be understated the winners that Oklahoma has recruited in this class? Just flat out winners. Like when you look back at it, like Jacoby Johnson's Mustang squad, since he started like really being a player for them and huge contributor, they have finished second in their division. They made it to the quarterfinals this year and lost to Jinx, which was they were up by a whole lot and lost last second to Jinx this year. And on top of that, last year they lost to Jinx in the state semis by 7 points. But Mustang hadn't been doing that type of stuff until just recently. And then you've got Derek LeBlanc leading his squad to the state championship. You have Jackson Arnold, who's taken Denton Guyer to 3 out of the last 4 state titles in 6A Division II. How about that? They give semifinals his sophomore year as well. And then you have obviously Eric McCarty and McAllister. Trying to roll through all these names. How did Caden Green, how did his squad do?
They lost in the state championship, one possession game.
But you just solidified my point. They're winners.
Man,
They're
they
winners.
came close.
Like all these guys are winners. Can that be like an underestimated trait that people don't really look at? Is how these kids' high school squads do? Because just because you're a good player doesn't mean you're going to be on a good high school team at all. I've seen it numerous times where their teams just suck, but they have that dude that's like a 4 or 5 star, and that's it. Can it be underestimated how much of a winner a lot of these guys are?
No, and I think that rolls right into evaluation, right? You evaluate guys that are not only excellent football players, but that provide a lift in one capacity or another to their team. And there are a lot of such players in the class for Oklahoma. That's why you don't see, you don't look across this class and you don't see guys that play on completely inept and inadequate teams. These are guys that in most cases are not only outstanding players, not only standouts on the gridiron, but they're leaders as well.
Yeah.
Oh boy, we got to get back to Mongo's original question, which is if OU plays Wisconsin in the Guaranteed Rate Bowl, who do you have winning, Brandon?
I have Oklahoma, but you want to go through that? Let's talk about the bowl game.
Yeah, let's talk about the bowl situation.
Here, you want me to tell you? Because I've got it on pretty good authority, at least at this point. There's like 3 options. There's a 4th out there, but I've heard 3 things as being like the most likely scenarios.
Okay. Fire away.
Houston, maybe it's the Texas Bowl or something like that, versus Arkansas is one of them I've heard. I've heard Memphis in the Liberty Bowl versus, oh my gosh. Holy crap. I think I just went blank on it. It was a ACC team, I believe.
ACC, Florida State.
It was either Florida State or NC State or something like that. And then Arizona versus a Big Ten team out in Phoenix. Maybe the Insight Bowl. Is it the Weed Eater Bowl? What's it called now?
The Weed Eater Bowl.
I don't remember, man. There's so many bowls. I don't remember. I guess I'm not used to delving down on bowls this low on the totem pole, bro.
Yeah, no.
So I don't really pay attention
the same boat
to
in that regard.
Yeah. Anyways, I was told that it would be a Big Ten team, kind of like maybe in Iowa or Wisconsin, or a who was the other team they brought up to me? Was it Illinois? Maybe potentially something like that. Anyways, so yeah, if I'm Oklahoma in one of those 3 bowls or options, the 4th one was obviously Notre Dame and Orlando, which is kind of I think a long shot at this point, but it's still being talked about a little bit. And I'm telling you, this came from like people are talking about. This came from the inside the Switzer Center that I heard all this from. If I'm Oklahoma, I want that Arkansas. It will be huge from a state to state perspective.
Yes, sir.
The fact that you're already starting the rivalry that is assuredly going to happen the second Oklahoma joins the SEC, because they already hate each other. And it would just be interesting from a national perspective to see both those squads go at each other, because it's always been perceived that Oklahoma is far greater of an athletic department, of a football program, just outclass them in every sense of the manner. And from Arkansas, it would be a way for them to sit there and go, hey, we're just as good as you now. You know what I mean? Like, we can beat you. This is SEC football. You may be this, or that in the Big 12, but you're average in the SEC. And so there's so many things in storylines that are going to come out of that if that happens. And plus, if you're Oklahoma and you beat Arkansas, as a source told me, it would propel them into the offseason way bigger than the only other game that would do that would be Florida State and maybe an NC State at the Liberty Bowl. I think that those three matchups are the ones that I think would, if Oklahoma came out on top, would just propel them into the offseason as not just as like a darling going into the next year, but more so inside the Switzer Center with confidence moving forward. Like, hey, things are moving in the right direction. Let's piggyback off that and really ride that wave all the way into the 2023 season.
Yeah, I don't know, man. At this point, it's just like, okay, well, whatever bowl you end up in, it's not really a high profile one, not really one that's going to draw a lot of eyeballs. And so I think the best you can hope for is a compelling head-to-head matchup with stakes on the recruiting trail, like that type of matchup would be. So I agree. You know, if you could take your pick, Arkansas would be one of the teams in the upper echelon, I think, of opponents that you should want. Now, we got $20 in the super chat from Blake Wilson. Appreciate you, Blake.
By the way, asks, 759, dude. 759 people watching right now. Can't thank you, Sooners fans, enough. That's awesome.
Y'all are wild, and we love you. Thank you. $20 from Blake Wilson, who asks, when do home visits start? Those will start on Friday. And he also says, I heard that Peyton Bowen is about to make a decision later this week. I mean, look, Blake, I've said it many a time. I will continue to say it. I have no idea what the timetable is for Peyton Bowen. And at this point, it's become a fruitless endeavor to try and pin it down. So, I mean,
yes, there are rumors though. I mean, literally, I talk to people that expect him to make one in the next, they said the next week, and another one said in the next couple of days. But at the end of the day, no matter how you slice it, he is going to make a decision soon because National Signing Day is soon. So if I'm Peyton Bowen, Parker, I do this before all the in-homes start. Because then you can control the in-homes at that point.
Exactly. Well, and it's a nice, easy break point, as it were, right?
And because Oklahoma has their set up. I'm just gonna throw that.
And there's no sense in sitting through an in-home and undergoing all of that emotional turmoil and having those difficult conversations with coaches if you're not serious about the institution as a whole. And so I think if Peyton Bowen knows if he's got it made up in his mind where he wants to be, then yeah, that logistically makes a lot of sense. The question then becomes, well, does he have his mind made up 100%? Yeah. And so that's, there's a variety of things that have caused this timetable to continue to shift further and further and further back. So my perspective has kind of always been, you know what, when it happens, but not going to try to throw a dart and figure out when that'll be. I think we can safely conclude that it will happen at some point within the next 3 weeks, because it's hard to fathom this thing lasting past early signing day.
No, I think that's fair. And it is not going to last past early signing day. He wants it done. He wants all this drama done. And I know there's a, well, he brought it upon himself by not, dialing things down and committing one way or the other, even though he's been committed to Notre Dame. Has he really been committed to Notre Dame this whole time with all the visits that he's taken? There's a lot of different angles that people take, but at the end of the day, it's his decision. How he wants to go about his recruitment is his prerogative. So, but I still think, there's a lot of good things I keep hearing about Oklahoma behind the scenes. And that doesn't mean that I'm necessarily like calling it, but like, if you wanted me to put a percentage on it, like right now, and I said, okay, Oklahoma, Notre Dame, I still would go 55-45 Oklahoma. Like, I'm still like, I feel like it's Oklahoma, but I'm not super confident. So if I'm wrong kind of deal. It is what it is. But, we went over all the reasons why, there's just so many things working in Oklahoma's favor compared to Notre Dame. And logistically, location, I didn't even bring that part up. And that's just huge, I think, especially when he's got his brother in his senior year. Probably pretty nice for a guy like him to be able to drive down and watch his brother play, on certain days. So I don't know.
Well, Brandon, we have recruiting to talk about. We will continue to talk about it, and no doubt there will continue to be questions fired our way in the chat about it as we progress here. But the other thing that has taken priority and taken precedence this week is you have players accepting Senior Bowl invites / declaring for the NFL draft, and you also have players beginning to hit the transfer portal. And as of today, I think we have 6 total confirmed portal names on Oklahoma's roster at this time. So you have Jordan Mukes, you have Theo Weiss, you have Joshua Eaton, all of whom have announced that they're going to be in the transfer portal on December 5th. 3 guys that have not made that announcement but are no longer with the team and can be expected to land in the portal on December 5th are Clayton Smith, Cavante Henry, and Joseph Wette. So 6 scholarship guys transferring out. At the very least, you have 6 outbound portal entrants. How many more do you foresee, Brandon?
Man. Maybe 4, maybe. I mean, look, and we're just talking transfer portal, right?
Yes, just portal.
Just portal. Well, and this is just me guessing, okay? We're unsure about Jaden Davis. We have a pretty good feeling that Bryson Washington will be one, right? Trying to think, man. Like, what about look, I think people keep asking me about Marcus Major, and I honestly think he sticks around because he's probably going to be, at least going into spring, the guy, or at least has the potential to be the guy. You know what I mean? So that would just not make sense from his perspective. So I named 2 potential. I mean, well, you got Eaton that's gone, Mukes. You got Weiss. Who else was there? There's 4. Who was the other one?
So Mukes, Weiss, Joshua Eaton. Those are the 3.
The 3. And then I named 2 that I potentially think could be in there. And I think you would agree with me on those, right?
Yes. And I would say those probably aren't the only ones.
Yeah. And I'm trying to think of the other ones.
Well, I don't want to name names.
Yeah. Yeah. But I just named those 2 because they were the ones that everybody talks about anyways.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to, in my head, like, how many do you think? I guess I would go another 4 or 5, maybe.
Yeah, I would say you're looking at anywhere from 10 to 15 in total.
Oh gosh, 15. That would be a lot, bro.
Yeah. Well, you already have 6, right? So.
Oh yeah, I always forget it. Yeah, Clayton Smith, Cavante Henry, and
Joseph
Wette, who aren't on the team. Yeah,
I would say.
Okay,
10 to 15.
That would make sense.
That's a fair range.
I was just going like from this point on.
Oh yeah. From this point on, I would say 6 to 8.
Yeah.
And I think, as we've talked about, right, most of these guys that are going to be hitting the portal are depth guys right now. Guys that haven't been contributing a whole heck of a lot, guys that are getting the gentle push from the coaching staff guys to whom the staff is saying, hey, thanks for what you've done here, but for your own good, it's probably best that you seek an opportunity.
How about this? How about this for a little curveball for people? What if, think about this, if you are a wide receiver at the University of Oklahoma, you've already been through 3 wide receiver coaches in 2 years. Dennis Simmons, Kel Gundy, LD Washington. The wide receivers have a really good rapport and really, 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 really like LD Washington. What if Oklahoma goes out and gets a different one, and let's say Mims decides he was coming back, but now he's going to transfer because he doesn't want to go through? And this is just hypothetical, people. So don't, and it's a hypothetical. I'm throwing it out there as a hypothetical, but it's a hypothetical that I wouldn't just throw out there if there wasn't like people talking about it, if that makes sense. Like, what if you decide to come back and they got a new wide receiver coach and he's just like, dude, that's my 4th one in 2 years. Now, obviously, if you transfer, my rebuttal is if you transfer, you're going to have a brand new one anyways. So what does it matter? You know what I mean? But if you're somebody like a Farouk, or, you know, I'm trying to think of some other guys, maybe a Darby or, you know, Trayvon West or those type of guys that have been through so many. Do you transfer? And I know a couple of the guys don't really contribute much, and so they would probably transfer anyways. But does that make sense what I'm saying? Like, you hate getting all those different voices. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well,
like, you like consistency in your room, and it just isn't a good look.
Yeah,
if you're Oklahoma, it just changes with the weather, who your wide receiver coach is.
We got a $20 contribution from Kelly Netzel with no comment at all. So thanks, Kelly.
Yeah, appreciate it.
If you have a question you want us to answer, by all means, throw it at us. But if not, thanks for the $20.
Yep.
So as we kind of continue to unpack all of this, and we think about the guys that have already declared.
But hey, real quick, because there's people commenting down there. Look, at the end of the day, I think Mims, if he decides to stay, he's staying. Like, but there is sort of that buzz out there, and it's weird. It's a weird buzz, I know, about all that. And we told you all, if you're on OU Insider, you know he met with Oklahoma today, because we told you all that was happening earlier this week. So tomorrow I'll have some notes on how that meeting went. But I mean, if he decides to stay, I think he stays at Oklahoma. I think that would just be ridiculous at this point. I mean, the dude had 1,000 yards receiving, and, you know, as good as he is, and he's a great receiver, if he doesn't drop, you know, those 4 or 5 touchdowns this year, he has double-digit touchdowns and probably another 200 or 300 yards receiving. Because they weren't just like short passes. They were like 50, 60-yard passes. So he's looking at, but also if he doesn't have those drops, we're probably not even sitting here talking about him coming back. So, you know what I mean, Parker? Like, things happen and they change the circumstances, right?
Yeah.
All the way around.
Now, among the guys that have already declared for the NFL draft or accepted Senior Bowl invites, really just given some sort of indication that they are not coming back, you have Eric Gray. That was written very early on, when you knew from probably mid-October that based on the way he was playing, he was not coming back to Norman. And with good reason. As things stand right now, he's probably coming off the board on the tail end of day 2 if he turns in a solid NFL Combine and Senior Bowl performance. I think at the very least, he's probably in that early day 3 mix, right about where Ramondre Stevenson went. So it makes a lot of sense for Eric Gray to make that jump, just because he doesn't have a whole lot to prove at the collegiate level at this point. He's accomplished a lot, both at Tennessee and at Oklahoma. Now the question is, does he play the bowl game? If he does, great. If not, you can expect to see a lot of Javonte Barnes. But maybe you start to see a little bit of Gavin Sawchuk as well, because he's only played in 2 games. So he can play in the bowl, maintain that redshirt year. And you may start to see Sawchuk get a little bit of run in the bowl game if Gray doesn't play. And then, of course, both of your starting tackles, Wanye Morris and Anton Harrison, headed to the Senior Bowl, not coming back. So Bill Bedenbaugh is going to have to replace 3 starters on the offensive line come 2023. Yep. Not only Harrison and Morris, but also right guard Chris Murray, who's exhausted his eligibility. Thoughts on the offensive line picture heading into next year, Brandon, and where that whole situation stands?
Yeah. Obviously, you got Rame anchoring it. So I think that's a good start, right? To have a 3-year starter being the guy that, and he's the one that makes all the calls, right? As a center. So I think that's a good start. I think number 2, the fact that you're going to have a lot of guys that are returning, like Matire is going to be returning. Obviously, Guyton's going to be returning. So they've got a lot of experience. And then I think earlier in the year, you got to see Jake Sexton get some experience and get some playing time. And then sparingly throughout the rest of the year, he got to touch the field a little bit. So you've got some experience coming back. And then you've got guys like Jake Taylor, Savion Byrd. Trying to think of some of these other names. Can you help me out here, Parker, with the offensive linemen? Because
so I think with the tackles,
you're going to have Sexton and Guyton are going to be your tackles.
Sexton and Guyton look to me like the starting tackles, unless something goes awry. The injury
Matire, the guard.
Whatever. You got Matire at 1 guard. You got Andrew Rame at center. Now the other guard position is where things get interesting, right?
It's going to be Taylor, Byrd, right?
Jake Taylor, Savion Byrd. And I'll tell you what, I will say this: I think Caden Green is going to be in that conversation too. When he shows up to campus.
Yep.
That's another guy that could very well be in the conversation. And it's not often that we see a true freshman start from day 1 at Oklahoma, but especially if the guys ahead of him, the more experienced guys in that room, leave the door open with their performance in fall camp, Green can be one of those guys. I think he's in the 2 deep at the very least come next fall. But that'll be an interesting battle at that right guard position. I think between Savion Byrd, Jake Taylor, and Caden Green, those are the 3 guys that I would figure are going to be in contention to start at that position. But I don't worry a whole lot about the offensive line. And it's funny, Brant, we said the exact same, the offensive line heading into this year, and all of the Bill Bedenbaugh haters had crawled out of the woodwork and just couldn't believe that Oklahoma might field a half decent offensive line in 2022. But they played very well, only surrendered 25 sacks on the year, and obviously paved the way for Eric Gray to rush for over 1,300 yards and 11 touchdowns, not to mention the 400 you got from Javonte Barnes, the 250 you got from Marcus Major. So I am not concerned about Bill Bedenbaugh's room looking ahead to next year, because Guyton already has plenty of experience when you look at the snaps he got here in 2022. Jacob Sexton was a guy that back in August, I remember talking to a source within the Switzer Center who said, look, if we needed him to, that kid could play and play pretty dang well right now. Now, obviously they didn't need him to, but if that's where Jacob Sexton was this past August, think about where he's going to be next August. Not worried at all about the tackles. Not worried at all about the incumbents in McCade Matire and Andrew Rame. Matire had a rocky year. I think he's better than what he put on tape this year. And I think that's why he didn't even bother to go through senior day festivities at Bedlam, because that's how committed he is to coming back and proving that this year was a blip and not a trend. and that he can right the ship. So to
Yep.
me, I think the only question is who starts at right guard. And I think regardless of who that is, you got a pretty solid unit across the board for Bill Bedenbaugh.
Yeah, no, I think at the end of the day, you've got to look at not just the type of talent that's coming up, but yeah, it's young. There is some inexperience there to an extent, but he always develops some way, somehow. The offensive line is more than just adequate. It's usually really good. So, and again, this year was another prime example of the offensive line doing their job 95% of the time and doing it well 95% of the time. And I fully expect it to be that way this coming year in 2023. I wouldn't be shocked for them to add a few guys out of the transfer portal at all. Obviously we're keeping our eyes and ears on the ground, and hopefully in the next few days I'll have a few names there for you all. But I mean, I don't know, man. Like when you bring in the Caden Greens of the world, you got Joshua Bates coming in. He's obviously very talented, being the top center. I'm trying to think of all the OL that they've got committed to them in 23 to mesh.
Green, Josh Bates, Heath Ozida, and Logan
Ozida.
Howland.
Yeah, and Howland's going to be a project, I think, a little bit, because he's only played 1 year of offensive line, was a tight end previously. But I think Ozida, Green, and Bates have a chance to come in and really make a contribution early. They're all three super talented guys. Ironically, all three have really loved Oklahoma a lot of their lives. Obviously, Ozida being from an Oklahoma family, Hayden Green being from an Oklahoma family. So that type of stuff plays into it. I always find those guys interesting because they always seem to pan out one way or the other. So it's going to be youthful next year, but it's going to be super talented. And what they do with that, I think, is going to be probably one of the more interesting things as far as meshing the transfer portal guys in, because they're going to go after a few with a lot of this youth. And if they can make that mesh early on with obviously Dylan Gabriel, Jackson Arnold back there at the helm, Nick Evers, there's obviously a chance for Oklahoma to be fairly good up front once again. And that seems to be the reigning theme all the time at Oklahoma when it comes to the offensive line, as long as Bill Bedenbaugh is the coach, honestly.
Before we talk JUCO here, I want to go ahead and acknowledge that there are almost 900 people watching this live stream. Now, I don't know how many of them are bots that are spamming our chat with links to adult dating sites, but almost 900 people is almost 900 people. So yep. Thank you all. 70% of you that are watching per the analytics are not subscribed to this YouTube channel. So if you are not subscribed, go ahead and hit subscribe. It helps you out. It helps us out. We're going to be cranking out all kinds of YouTube content over the course of the off season, and certainly down the stretch here as we get closer and closer to early signing day. So it's an easy way to make sure you don't miss a thing. If you're not subscribed, do us a favor. Go ahead and click that subscribe button. It doesn't cost you a dime, and you won't miss a thing from us. Now, as far as JUCO is concerned, we've already seen Oklahoma land one JUCO addition in this cycle in junior college All-American defensive back Kendall Dolby from up the road in Miami, Oklahoma at NEO. They are in the mix for another JUCO prospect, and an elite one at that, in offensive lineman Keyshawn Blackstock. Now, I will say this with regard to Blackstock. There are several schools that he is high on, but Oklahoma is right there in the thick of it and has as good a shot as anybody. So that is one that we're going to keep close tabs on down the stretch. And once OU and Samson Okunlola, what buzz there was there, kind of fizzled out, it became apparent that it was going to be JUCO or portal for Oklahoma to add another offensive lineman or two if that's a direction they wanted to go. And I think now that not only Anton Harrison, but also Wanye Morris have elected to declare for the NFL draft, there is an immediate need for another guy, if only for the sake of depth. And I think if you bring in a guy like Keyshawn Blackstock, he adds a little bit more than just depth. That's a guy that can be competitive in a battle for a starting role. So Blackstock, definitely a name to know. I want to say offhand, he's a top 10 JUCO player in the nation per 24/7 Sports. So big time addition that would be for Oklahoma via the JUCO ranks if they could score a guy like that to help cap off the 2023 cycle. Let's see what we got from the chat. Let's see what the folks are saying. Somebody said Cecilia Kana is not subscribed. A lot of people asking about Cecilia Kana in the chat. And so I guess that is one recruitment that we have not touched yet. And here's where I stand on it, Brandon, and I'll let you chime in. But here's my prevailing thought on the Akana recruitment. Within the walls of the Switzer Center, there is confidence with regard to that kid. There is a lot of confidence. And usually there's not a whole lot of misplaced confidence coming from those sources. Based on who you talk to, based on the people elsewhere that know this recruitment inside and out and are willing to share their insight, based on the people that I've talked to, you get a whole lot of varying opinions, right? Some will say it's a battle between OU and Texas. Some will say it's a battle between OU and LSU. Some will say it's OU and Texas A&M. And you got some people that say, hey, it's OU and it's Tennessee and it's Utah, right? Mm-hmm. But what's the common denominator there?
OU.
And that, to me, tells you all you need to know. By the way, if you follow Cecilia Kana on Instagram and you pay attention to his activity on that particular social media side, because he's not terribly active on Twitter, but you log into Instagram, if you didn't know any better, you'd think Cecilia Kana was either committed to Oklahoma or already enrolled at Oklahoma and part of the team, the way that he gasses up Oklahoma players and commits alike with pro OU sentiment. So I feel good about Oklahoma as it pertains to Akana, the national top 100 edge prospect out of the state of Utah. That's my feeling on it.
Yeah. I hate getting everybody's hopes up. But there's just something about this Cecilia Kana thing that has in my gut. It just feels like one of those things that Oklahoma and Brent Venables specifically, because he's taken such a interest and made it his priority to recruit Akana, that it's just one of those things that if Oklahoma loses out there, I don't know, I wouldn't call it shocking to me at the end of the day, but I think I would say, I guess it would be a little disappointing, right? Just, yeah, I get Texas, I get Texas A&M, I get LSU. Like, I get those schools are making progress with him, and they're going to be a problem, specifically LSU and Texas. But Oklahoma has done such a good job with his parents, with his coaches, with his mom, even his sister at Texas, that it seems like at the end of the day, he fits what Oklahoma does on and off the field. And I think that's kind of the intrigue there. Now, if he goes to LSU or Texas, no, I'm not going to be shocked. I'm not going to be shocked at all. But Oklahoma has been that team that's always been talked about with Akana. So these in-homes coming up this week, in the next few weeks, are going to be critical there because they're family oriented. And you have to understand his dad still lives in Hawaii and coaches down there. He moved up to Utah so he could play during COVID because he didn't want to lose out on a lot of time, which would have hurt his recruitment and his chances. So these in-homes whether they're in Hawaii, whether they're in Utah, they're all going to play a massive role. So it's going to be something we're going to be watching closely on OU Insider for sure.
We got a $10 contribution from Shane Lewis, who says, just sending because I love y'all. Thanks for all you do. Well, you know what? We love you too, Shane. And we very much appreciate those of you who contribute in the super chat with a monetary investment, because that actually goes directly into the pockets of our unseen producer, Spencer Forsyth. Now, he and his wife are moving in the next month. So the super chat is your opportunity to support the relocation efforts, help fund the U-Haul, as it were. So thanks to all of you that have already contributed this week and in weeks past. We appreciate it. Spencer certainly appreciates it as well. Now, more questions from the chat. A lot of people wondering about Malachi Coleman, especially after the news today that Mickey Joseph has been arrested. I don't want to get this messed up. It's 3rd-degree felony assault, if I'm not mistaken. No, not felony. I'm sorry. Again, I don't want to mistakenly state a legal term that might make this sound more or less severe than it is. So I'm just gonna pull it up and read it verbatim so that I don't make any mistakes here. Mickey Joseph has been arrested on suspicion of strangulation and 3rd-degree domestic assault by the Lincoln Police Department, which came completely out of left field. Not something that anybody expected to come across their Twitter timeline on a Wednesday afternoon. But if you paid attention to the arc of Malachi Coleman's recruitment, what you know is Mickey Joseph is the only reason why Malachi Coleman even considered Nebraska among his final group of contenders, right? And so we obviously don't know what's going to become of this legal situation. And it's early on in the process, and this only happened at about 2 p.m. this afternoon. So there's still a lot of details that I'm sure are being compiled behind the scenes. I'm sure there are a lot of accounts that are being collected, and it's going to take some time before we know exactly what went on this afternoon. Mm-hmm. But I will say this. In a world where Mickey Joseph is dismissed at the University of Nebraska, I think it's open season for Malachi Coleman again.
Because, yeah, but does Oklahoma go after him is the other question.
And that's what I'm getting to. I think Coleman would be willing to look elsewhere if Mickey Joseph were no longer employed at Nebraska. The follow-up question, though, is, would Oklahoma be willing to reopen that line of communication? And seeing as how Oklahoma and Coleman kind of went their separate ways, not by Coleman's choice, but by Oklahoma's over the final month or so before he committed, I would not anticipate OU getting involved once again, because if they were to re-recruit him, it would have to be as a wide receiver. And I think at this point in time, it's very clear who Oklahoma is recruiting to complete their class at wide receiver, right? So unless Micah Tease gives OU the hard stiff arm, which is tough to imagine, and I would say that is the first condition. The second condition would be Chance Fitzgerald commits elsewhere and shows OU no interest, doesn't give him the time of day. Only then might there be an avenue for Oklahoma to reopen communication with Malachi Coleman. So don't hold your breath on that one. Any updates on CJ Colden? No, there are not. And I will say,
I expect him to go pro. I'm just going to say it.
Okay. Well, the recent intel suggests that Woody Washington is going to be back in an Oklahoma uniform in 2023, which is big. I mean, that's big, because that was a guy that was thinking about going pro after last season. And so to not only get him back in 2022, but potentially to get him back in 2023, the guy that's been your most reliable cover corner over the last 3 seasons, that's huge. If you can talk Colden into coming back, man, I think you're feeling really good about the secondary in 2023, which is weird, isn't it? Because it feels like for a decade, if not longer, at Oklahoma, you've always had apprehensions about the secondary as a group. But If next year you have Woody Washington and CJ Colden on the corners, you got Billy Bowman at one safety position, and shoot, take your pick. Key Lawrence, Robert Spears Jennings, Peyton Bowen at the other safety position, or any combination of those three and others, right? All of a sudden it's like, is the secondary an area of strength for Oklahoma at that point? I would argue it is. So I said it as soon as that game concluded on Saturday. To me, if you're Oklahoma, the two guys that you have to convince to come back, the two guys that are highest on the priority list in terms of what they can add to this team in 2023 are Marvin Mims offensively and CJ Colden defensively, because Colden was your most reliable defensive player over the course of the second half of the season. And I would say there was a significant margin between him and anybody else. And so you convince him to come back, you convince him to run it back for what would be his 7th year of college football. He would be the first 7th-year senior in program history. You got a very, very rock-solid cornerback duo between him and Woody Washington. Last question before we wrap up, and I'm sure our answers to this will be quick and easy. Is BV on the hot seat if OU goes 6-6 again next year, Brandon?
Maybe. I mean, I would assume he's not going to go anywhere. They're not going to get rid of him after that year. But if he doesn't straighten up and show progress in 24, yeah. I mean, this is Oklahoma. Like, you can't go 6-6 back-to-back years and then not be ramifications for it. Now, I think the first things first, they would say you need to replace some of your staff. And then after that, if that didn't work, then, it becomes they replace him. But I don't think that's going to happen. So, I mean, this is a what if scenario, I guess, but I just don't see it happen. I think Oklahoma is 8-4, 9-3 next year, showing great progress, and better than that after that.
And I would say Brent Venables gets at least 4 seasons in my eyes. I know a lot of people have said he will get at least 3. I think he gets at least 4. I can't fathom the Sooners unless this thing really turns south. And even so, I doubt that the Oklahoma administration would be willing to usher BV out the door after 3 years. Now, again, if there is no improvement last year to next year, this year to next year, I should say, and you do go 6-6, 7-5 again, then yeah, I think that seat starts to warm heading into 2024. But I don't think it's the type of deal where one loss in 2024, the first sign of adversity is going to be Venables is fired. Let's cobble this together and start the coaching search as we get ready for the offseason. So, yeah, I'm not too worried about all of that. Even now, as the Sooners wrap up the 2022 season at 6-6 and have only the Guaranteed Rate Bowl or the Cheez-It Bowl or the Armed Forces Bowl or the Liberty Bowl or whatever bowl they end up in to try to get to 7 wins on the year. Okay, Brandon, last thing before we sign off. Who's the next wide receivers coach at the University of Oklahoma?
Oh, my gosh. Yeah, Hola Kyle. So first off, Hola Kyle, he asked if there's going to be any staff changes this year. So this goes right into that. So thank you for the donation, Hola. I miss your videos, bro, on YouTube. Respect. If y'all go look at Hola Kyle on YouTube, he was one of the originals. Him and LA Sooner were the GOATs and the OGs of the videos on YouTube. So the awesome hype videos. But anyways, I talked to somebody today, and they feel it's either going to be Samples or LD Washington. So I kind of agree there. But they threw out a name that Sooner fans know. He just is an older guy. He's at Boston College now. He's been at Oklahoma. He recruited really well when he was at Oklahoma originally. He coached with Levy at UCF, and he coached with Venables at Oklahoma. Daryl Wyatt was brought up.
Yep.
And this person I talked to is like a national guy and all that type of stuff. And I just was like, man, I don't know. That just seems like how do you think Oklahoma fans would respond to that? Number one, when they have a chance to have LD Washington return, who's got all these guys lined up, the people like him, the players like him, and they want to play for him now. And he's got the recruits. He's got a really good rapport with Micah Tees. He's got Kenyon Brown. Obviously, he's got Jaquays Petaway. Like, do you want to do that and potentially scare off your recruits, the players that are returning or potentially returning? Or do you go Samples? Because I think Samples would be able to hold on to these guys because he's got the name, the history around Texas, particularly with Petaway. And I think with Valai and Levy still on staff, you can hold on to Keon Brown. But he would have some sway with like a Mims, right? Being from the DFW area. He would have some sway with a Farouk, being the fact that he coached in the NFL and knows what it takes to get to that level. But I know Wyatt did the same thing. But Wyatt isn't the same. And I'm not saying he's not a good coach because he's a great coach. He's coached in the NFL. He's done things. He's developed NFL talent. He's recruited at a high level. But does he have that splash that you need right now being 6-6?
Are you asking me?
Yeah, I don't. I'm asking.
Oh, I don't know, man. You get to a certain point at 6-6, you just kind of have to reevaluate everything, right? And so to go back to the original question, who's the next wide receiver coach at Oklahoma? We've heard buzz for multiple candidates, right? And I posted an update today on OUinsider.com VIP, and to give you the Spark Notes version, the three names that I mentioned in that update were Rashad Samples, Malcolm Kelly, Daryl Wyatt.
Yeah,
now,
I don't think Kelly's going to take it. I talked to TCU people today, and they didn't think that was happening.
Right now, I think the most credible intel points to Samples, but it's a stickier situation than you would tend to expect, just because he's working an NFL job right now. So it's not as easy as
these other teams offering him too.
Yeah. But
OU hasn't offered yet. OU hasn't offered yet.
Very highly in demand.
Yep.
And so, I know if Samples ends up at Oklahoma with as dynamic of a recruiter as he is, the Sooners are going to do some things on the trail in the state of Texas.
Yeah.
If it's not Samples, I can see it being Daryl Wyatt. I can maybe see it being Jeff Scott, given his familiarity with Brent Venables. I think at the end of the day, man, the home run hire, if you're not able to score Malcolm Kelly, which, like you mentioned, Brandon, it just doesn't look like that is going to happen at this rate. I think the home run hire is Rashad Samples. If you can land a guy that is, like I said, and I use the word dynamic, and that's a very bombastic word, but it holds true for Rashad Samples. That dude is a juggernaut of a recruiter. That's the type of dude that's going to help put you in contention for the number 1 overall recruiting class in 2024. And based on who Oklahoma's already put a red eye on in that class and started recruiting heavily and received reciprocated interest from, that's already on the table, with or without Rashad Samples.
What are the three kids from Duncanville that Oklahoma's already offered, or 4?
Yes, you got Caden Durham, Ja'Cory Moore,
Colin Simmons,
and is there another one?
Yeah, I think there's just 4. Well, one of them does. Yeah, one of them is, I think, a 23 DB that Oklahoma didn't really recruit, but
yeah, Deldrick Madison.
Yeah, Point being, like, that's a good start in 24 and 25. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
that's a good start. And then you saw what he did when he was at TCU with Biddle and all those guys that he pulled.
Yeah.
I mean, he had him at SMU, then he went to TCU and they just follow him on over there, and he almost pulled before he left to go to TCU. He almost pulled Savion Byrd from Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Like, it was
That was
SMU, Oklahoma for
on
Savion
signing
Byrd.
day too. Like,
Yeah,
that was
on
a battle
signing
that
day.
went down all the way to the wire.
I visited like 2 days or the weekend before National Signing Day, and Bird told me he was going to Oklahoma, but like it, he said it was like tough. Like, it got down to where his mom finally put her foot down and she was like, "You're going to OU." And that's where it came down to, because they were so back and forth between SMU and Oklahoma. So he's a great recruiter. Great recruiter. Now he's a running backs coach at obviously with San Francisco, but I think that helps him, because now he's coached running backs, wide receivers. Like, that allows him at some point to roll over and be that offensive coordinator guy, because he's coached multiple positions. And that's something head coaches look for, is, can you coach multiple positions? Do you know how to work them into a system? And so also, but I do think the LD Washington thing, like, I think that's got to be hard. Like, what do you do with him? Is he the highest paid analyst ever at some point? Because no, and I mean that seriously, because one, you hold on to him, which helps you hold on to guys around the program and some of the recruits. On top of that, plus he's already started recruiting 24 and 25. He can help you in that regard. And then if Samples or whoever they hire decides to go elsewhere, you just bump him up there and you make him the guy for good at that point. So I think you have to make him the highest paid wide receiver analyst or assistant wide receiver coach of all time. Honestly, like a 6-figure guy, like, you would have to do it.
Yeah. Well, I think we've about covered everything over the course of this live. And so with that, I'd say let's tie a bow on this thing. If you are not a VIP at ouinsider.com, now would be a phenomenal time to join, because you got 50% off VIP subscriptions until Monday, December 5th at 11:59 p.m. So if you join any time in the next 5 days, 50% off your annual subscription. That's over $100 in value for only $53.70, which comes out to something like $4 and change per month. So very minimal investment. No better place to get all of your in-depth OU football and recruiting information, even beyond what you get on this channel and on these live streams. So if you're not a VIP, go ahead, join right now or anytime this week at 50% off. We'd love to have you. We think you'll love being a part of the community at ouinsider.com. If you are already a VIP, we very much appreciate you.
It's
every
upgradable.
single one of you.
It's upgradable. So if you're month to month, you get upgraded right now.
Yeah. And
$46, $46.
On that note, if you just want to try it out for a month, it's only $1.
Yep.
30 days, $1. So give yourself a trial run. You can cancel after that first month if you don't like the information you're being fed. But if you do like it, we'd love to have you stick around. And we got a community of thousands and thousands of VIP members that talk OU football literally 24/7. And you're welcome to interact with them at will on the message boards and elsewhere. So with that, again, subscribe at ouinsider.com VIP if you haven't already. Certainly subscribe to this YouTube channel one way or another. Thank you all so much for making our jobs so enjoyable and for tuning in with us every Wednesday night for OU Insider Live. For Brandon Drumm and our producer, Spencer Forsyth, I'm Parker Thune. We will see you next Wednesday. In the words of Brandon Drumm, y'all have a blessed night.